Hello, today we're going to have class using Zoom. I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, so we're working with the Chapter 5 signed numbers. And so what we're going to do first is do a warm-up. And so the warm-up, basically the first part you're comparing using the less than or greater than symbol. And then you evaluate the next set. You give the opposite of the next group. And then you perform the indicated operations. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to write down the problem and to work them out. And so pretty much I'm going to go through it, okay? So you can pause it and stop and work it, but I'm going to show you what the answer is, okay? So you can kind of operate the video on your own. So, okay, so I'm going to go in and we're going to work it out. And so you can pause it before I get to this point, okay, if you have not completed it. All right, so if you have, let's move forward. And when we do that, I'm going to show you the answer to the warm-up. All right, so when look at the warm-up. So hopefully you did it correctly. The first one is -3 is greater than -7. The second one, 0 is greater than -4. Given the value of each, we're dealing with the absolute value. When you deal with the absolute value of a number, okay, so absolute value just means the distance from 0. Okay, when you're dealing with the absolute value. All right, and so the absolute value of 8 is 8. The absolute value of -8 is 8. The absolute value of -31 is also 31. All right, given the opposites, give the opposite of each number. The opposite of 12 is -12. The opposite of -4 is 4. And the opposite of 80 is, oops, should be -80. There we go. All right. All right, now perform the indicated operation. And so we have -2 plus -4 is -6. You have a -25 plus 0 plus 13 plus 6. And so when you add these two, you still get -25. I went ahead and added 13 and 6 to get 19. -25 plus 19 is a -6. And then 9 minus 5 is 4. Then we have a -3 minus 4, which is a -7, because debt plus more debt gives you more debt. So good, so good. So comparing, dealing with the absolute value, doing the opposites, performing operations. Okay, so that's the beginning part. Okay, we're going to move to the next group. All right, so we'll do part 2. Okay, so you continue. You are still performing operations with these signed numbers. Okay, so what you can do is you can pause me because on the next set, I'm going to show and talk about the solution. So you can pause me and then start. Okay, so I'm going to show you the next slide, which will have the answers, and we'll go over that. All right, so looking at the first one, 13, you have a negative of a negative. So when you have a negative of a negative, that becomes positive. Okay, that's the rule. Negative of a negative becomes positive. So you have -5 plus 1. That gives you -4. Here you're multiplying. When you're multiplying Two negatives is always positive. If you multiply positive and negative, you get negative. So -2 times -7 is 14. -7 times +4 is a -28. And then notice in 16, you have a -3 times 2 times 0 times 100. So, but this 0 right here just makes everybody 0. Okay, good. So there's no work to do. It's just 0. Then we have -3 squared. -3 squared means -3 times -3. And then -3 times -3 is +9. Good. Division, you have a -8 divided by 2. That gives you -4. Now 19 and 20, you have to be careful. 0 divided by 3 is 0. So when you have 0 on top and a non-zero at the bottom, that's 0. However, when you have a non-zero number at the top, like -3 and 0 in your denominator, you can't have 0 in your denominator. It makes it undefined. Okay? If you put this in your calculator, -3 divided by 0, you get an error. It'll say error. Okay? So it's undefined. Now we get into our fractions from the first week. Division of fractions, subtraction or addition of fractions, but we're dealing with signed numbers in this case, so they're coming back. But remember, when you're dividing, you just multiply by the reciprocal. You do not have to find a common denominator. So -4/5 divided by -7/15 becomes -4/5 times 15 over -7. And so what I did is I simplified first. Okay, 5 and 15 have 5 in common. 5 goes in itself 1 time. 5 goes into 15 3 times. And I know a negative times a negative is going to be positive, so I know my outcome is going to be positive. So 4 times 3 is 12, and then 1 times 7 is 7. So that gives you 12/7. Then we have addition or subtraction of fractions, but we also have a special case, negative and negative, that automatically becomes positive. So this is why I have, it becomes -11/12 plus 7/8. And so in order to add or subtract fractions, you need to have a common denominator. The least common denominator of 12 and 8, 24. Okay, and so -11/20/12 becomes -22/24. And then you have 7/8 becomes 21/24, because 8 goes in 24 3 times, and 3 times 7 is 21. So now you have equivalent fractions. -22 plus 21 is -1, so you get -1/24. 23, you have a order of operations. All right, and so what we did was we squared the -3 to get 9, so that's 4 minus 9 plus 5, and then I worked inside the parentheses for 2, and then we got 4 minus 9 plus 10, that's multiplication, and then I added, subtracted from left to right. -5 plus 10 is 5. Okay, so hopefully you were able to follow along with that. All right, so let's move to the next slide. Let's see, I think it's 3. All right, so continuing on, you have, this is your next problem from 23, so 24. You have one more problem. 5 minus the absolute value of 7 minus 12 minus 2 to the third over 2 times 3 plus 2. All right. Give you time to write that. All right, so now what we can do is go ahead and do this. All right, so we have 5 minus, and then the absolute value, 7 minus 12 is -5, and then minus 2 to the third is 8, all over 2 times 5. Okay, the absolute value of -5 is 5. So that's 5 minus 8 over 10. These cancel. You're left with negative 8 over 10. You have to reduce all your fractions. 2 goes into both 8 and 10. So that's negative 4 over 5. Okay? And so that deals with some of the operations with signed numbers. And then the next part is dealing with the powers of 10, which is we need to review your laws of exponents. So there's certain laws that you need to know that will help you out. Shortcuts, I call them. And when you're multiplying like bases, you want to add your exponents. So for example, 10 to the third times 10 to the fifth, that gives you 10 to the eighth power. Ten to the eighth power because you add them. When you're dividing like bases, you subtract. Now you have to be careful with this one. I set it up in this with the bigger exponents on top here. 10 to the fifth over 10 to the third is equal to 10 to the 5 minus 3, which is 10 to the second, or 100. Now, sometimes you might end up with a negative exponent, and you don't want to have a negative exponent as part of your answer. So, in this case, so you have a to the negative n is equal to 1 over a to the n. Now, in this case here, if you're dealing with, when we move to scientific notation or engineering notation, it's okay to have negative exponents. But in general, they like for you to have positive exponents. But when you're dealing with the powers of 10, it's okay to have the negative exponent. So if you do have like 10 to the negative 2, just in general, that would be 1 over 10 to the second if they wanted to have a positive exponent, which is 1 over 100. All right, power over power. When you have a exponent on the outside, then you multiply. So if I have 10 to the third raised to the fifth, then that's 10 to the 3 times 5, which is equal to 10 to the 15th. And so if I'm dealing with something like this, 10 to the negative 3 over 10 to the 5. That would be 10 to the negative 3 minus 5, okay, which is 10 to the negative 8. And so if I'm dealing with scientific notation or engineering notation, then that's fine. You would leave it as whatever you got, something times 10 to the negative 8. But if it's just a general problem, then you can say, or that's 1 over 10 to the 8th power. That's the same. Okay. All right. Good. So I hope this is clear. If you have any questions, please let me know. Okay. The next video will be coming up shortly.